Dana White may have dropped the ball. And it's the MMA versus boxing debate that can't seem to go away. And it's one I'm kind of tired of. But I get why it sells. I get why it doesn't go away. And Dana White may have stirred it all up again. And this one might have been a huge mistake. And this comes down to Jake Paul. And who would have thought it's going to come down to Jake Paul, this MMA versus boxing? And who would have thought that he might prove the points that a lot of boxers have been saying that was going to happen? A lot of commentators said it was going to happen. And who would have thought Jake Paul's going to be the one to do it? And I think that he knows he's going to be the one to do it. I think there's some genius to either him or the person managing him or the one that's selecting the strategy they're going about his career in boxing. And I think Dana White started talking crazy on the Mike Tyson podcast. And he maybe should have rethought this. These podcasts, you don't really get time to choose what you're going to talk about or choose your answers or think about your answers. And he started talking crazy on Jake Paul and started saying that he's not a real fighter, which he isn't. He started saying that, he's not really skilled, which technically in boxing compared to world championship level, no, he's not. But he said that Ben Askren was a legit MMA fighter, which he was. He said that, he was a world champ in promotions and and decent promotions, which he was. And he said that Ben Askren is going to put a beating to Jake Paul, which he isn't. And he said he's going to put $1 million on it. So he officially, when he did that, he made Ben Askren an MMA guy, a UFC guy. He made him a guy representing the sport that he is the president of. That's what he did. And I think that was a huge mistake. I think that he shouldn't have touched this. He should have just let this one go and said that, well, I don't know, Ben Askren is not that great stand-up. That's what he should have said. He said, that's not his game. He's a wrestler. He's probably going to lose that fight. It doesn't mean anything. That's what he should have said. But he didn't say that. And now it's UFC versus boxing. And I know people are going to say, well, it's MMA. It's not UFC. It's not sport. I get that. But when people talk it, they say UFC versus boxing. That's what it is. Because UFC is the highest level of MMA. And boxing doesn't have a league or anything like that. So it's just boxing. But that's where we're at. That's exactly where we're at. And Jake Paul's going to beat Ben Askren. And the strategy going to be used by Ben Askren is the same strategy that Conor was going to use against Floyd. The one that all MMA fighters and all the trainers always say it's going to work. That clinch game where the boxers have no idea what to do in that. He's going to use the same strategy and it's not going to work. It's going to be a sloppy holding match because Jake Paul doesn't have the necessary abilities to fight in the inside. And Ben Askren is going to be able to, take some shots top of the head and get in the inside. But Ben Askren is not going to be able to do what he thinks he's going to do, where he's going to clinch and take it to Jake Paul. It's not. It's going to wrap up, and they're both going to be tired. They're not going to have the legs and the hips and the bend of the knees to get the position and angles you need to find the inside. That's a highly skilled thing to do to find the inside. It's a thing we take for granted. A guy that could really find the inside and get the power into the shots and get the angles he needs to work on the inside with that distance. It's a very hard thing to do. And Jake Paul's not going to have it. Ben Askren's not going to have it. So what's going to happen is they're going to get separated by the ref. And Jake Paul's going to get off first. And his shot's going to be heavier because he outweighs Ben Askren. And he's outweighed every opponent. It's a beautiful strategy that no one's talked about, right? Is making sure you're going in with a guy that you're bigger than. And Jake Paul will be bigger than Ben Askren, who fights at 170. Jake Paul's cutting to 195. And he's going to get off first. He's going to be the faster, bigger man. And his shots are going to look more impressive on the outside. And then Ben Askren's going to try to work on the inside when they're both going to be wrapped up. And then the ref's going to break it up. And it's going to be a sloppy fight where Jake Paul's going to win a decision. And then Jake Paul's going to call out another guy. He's going to say, well, hopefully the next guy doesn't hold all day. And he's going to have a point. And we're going to have to get rid of this strategy that every MMA guy has said that's going to work against a boxer is that he's just going to clinch him and work on the clinch and just completely take the boxer out of his game because no one's ever tried to clinch and find the inside of the clinch. Even though we've been doing this sport for, hundreds of years, the MMA fighter has to solve the thing that a boxer could never think of, right? And we're going to throw that away. And boxing has really, it's boxing versus MMA, but with boxing, no chip in the game. They have nothing. Nothing. They have no dog in the fight. They have no dog in the fight because Jake Paul's not a real boxer. He's a YouTuber. And they've been saying that. And all the fighters have said that. And he'll get destroyed by any legit boxer. Any guy that's just really a professional boxer. But if he runs through an MMA guy, well then boxing gets a win against MMA. That's just the way it plays out. I don't care about this argument. I'm dogging this fight. I truly do not care about this argument. Now, do I think an MMA fighter can go and win a world title in boxing? I don't. I don't see the guy that could do it. Now, they're very skilled MMA fighters, and maybe if he built his way up, maybe, right? But that's not what they said. You had Tyron Woodley saying he could knock out Canelo, right? You had Conor McGregor saying that he could beat everyone. You've had, I've heard Dominic Cruz say that their styles could work in boxing and all that. This is going to be an example, but it's not a real boxer. It's Jake Paul. And he's in a beautiful spot, and he can win this fight, which he probably will. I'll pick him to win. And he's going to go on to fight another MMA fighter, and he could keep going over and over again. And he, maybe not UFC fighters, right? But maybe guys that were in the UFC and have a name in the UFC. And maybe he could keep, and that's maybe even better for him because they're not even guys in their prime. They're guys the UFC doesn't even want anymore. And he keeps running through them, and he keeps headlining these fights, and he keeps being the main event, and he keeps having this pay-per-view is basically built around him, right? Where they have music, and this has the audience, right? A minority audience that really MMA hasn't been able to capture, right? A minority audience that MMA hasn't captured, that somehow Jake Paul has captured the imagination of, right? And the rap, hip hop, all that crowd, right, is coming in behind Jake Paul. And Dana White has never want to try to get that crowd. He never has. Okay, he never has. I'm not saying that he's racist, not saying anything like that. It's just not a crowd that he has been able to reach. And Jake Paul has. And these guys don't watch MMA. They grew up watching boxing. They grew up watching Tyson, Sugar Ray Leonard, Pernell Whitaker, De La Hoya, Chavez. These are the guys that are watching this, and they want Jake Paul to win. Jake Paul is bringing in a crowd that says, I don't really like MMA, and I want him to win. And Ben Askren's a perfect guy to be the symbol of MMA. He is. He's a white wrestler. He's the perfect symbol of what they think MMA is, right? It's almost like two stereotypes. That's really what it almost is. And it's clashing, and I think Dana White made this a thing that it didn't have to be. When he didn't have to put his chips in like that. Another thing that's key about this is a young brand of fans that that boxing MMA are arguing over. And I'm talking about streamers, right? I'm talking about TikTok, YouTube, all that, right? Boxing, for some reason, I don't know how, YouTubers, right, and TikTokers, boxing has been a key part in that crowd. And you had Ryan Garcia, and it's just captured that market for some reason. And Dana White is trying to get that market. That's why he has the Nout Gang. He has those guys. He lets them come to the fights. He invites them over, lets them film and all that. Well, he's not doing that. It just, because he thinks it's funny. He's doing that because he's trying to capture a younger audience. But boxing is way bigger with the streamers and all them than MMA is. And if Jake Paul, right, keeps knocking out MMA guys, it's another win for boxing along with that crowd. And I think that that's another underrated thing about this event that people aren't seeing. This is a bigger thing than people are realizing. And I know that people want to undersell because it's Jake Paul, but it doesn't mean there's not something there. There's not a story there. There's not something developing. Just because, the person that it is, that's the way life works. It's never who you think. You know what I mean? It's never who you think. It's never going to play out exactly the way you thought it was going to play out. But that's where we're at. And you have MMA versus boxing. And Jake Paul, in maybe luck, genius, I don't know, is in the driver's seat with it. And I'm curious to see how this plays out. And what are the ramifications of it going forward. Thank you. This has been The Weigh-In.